Hey, what's up guys? I came back. Once again, I'm back. Today we're going to be doing another problem, 1547, minimum cost to cut a stick. So, given a wooden stick of length n units, the stick is labeled from 0 to n. For example, a stick of length 6 is labeled as follows. So we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Given an integer array cuts, where cuts I denotes the position you perform a cut at. Okay, so cuts I is where we should cut. You should perform the cuts in order. You can change the order of the cuts as you wish. The cost of one cut is the length of the stick to be cut. Okay, the total cost is the sum of costs of all cuts. When you cut a stick, it will be split into two smaller sticks, i.e. the sum of their lengths is the length of the stick before the cut. Okay, so the sum of their lengths is the length of the stick before the cut. Okay, makes sense. Please refer to the first example for a better explanation. Return the minimal total cost of the cut. So basically, let's say we had this stick from 0 to 7 and we had these cuts 1, 3, 4, 5. Okay, if we cut it in this order, it's going to return the minimum cost required. So let's say we cut first at 3. So if we cut it at 3, the cost would be from 0 to 7 because we're cutting a stick of size 7, right? So wherever we make the cut is going to be, the first cost is always going to be 7. So we'll just make it at 3 for now. We'll make it at 3. And now we have two sticks between 0 and 3 and 7. Okay? So let's just cut the stick further up between 0 and 3. We decided to cut it at 1. When we cut it at 1, the cost will be what? 3, okay? So because from this one, and this one, they're each one unit 1, and the cost here will be 3. It doesn't matter where we cut it between 0 and 3. All that matters is now if we cut anything here, it will cost 3. Okay, so moving on from there, we have a stick now between 0 and 1, and we're just left with that. We don't need to cut it any further. And on this side, between 3 and 7, we have two cuts left. We have the cut 4 and the cut 5 to make. So first, we'll choose to make the cut 5. When we make the cut 5, the cost will be 4 because 7 minus 3 is 4. The length of the stick is 4. Then we're left with two more sticks of size 2 and another one of size 2. And so we decided to cut between 3 and 5 at the cut 4. And that will give us two more sticks of size 1 from 3 to 4 and 4 to 5. And cutting the stick between 3 and 5 will cost 1. Okay, so we have 1, 2, 1, 1, and then 2. And the total cost will be 16. How does that work? So the first one costs 7. This one costs 3. So that's 10 already. And then if we cut this one further, it will cost another. Actually, no, let's say we don't cut any further. But then if we cut, so we have 10 and 3, so that's 13. Sorry, 7 and 3, so that's 10, right? And then from here, we have to cut it further. So first we cut it at 5. So that will give us, this will give us the cost of 4, right? So we have 7 plus 3 plus 4, right? Which is 14. And then between 3 and 5, we have to do another cut at 4. And that stick was originally a size 2, so it gives us another cut of size 16. Okay, so how are we going to approach this problem? As you can see, I have my super cool setup right here. Very, very professional. And we'll have the camera recording from up there. So I'll be right back with you in 1 second. Oh yeah. Hey, what's up guys? I'm back. I decided not to use the paper. The lighting is really bad and writing and deleting, erasing stuff on the paper gets really jumbly bumbly. So I figured it's much easier just explaining right here on the LEETCODE website. Okay, so we have the stick. Okay, it's of size 7. And we need to find an order of the cuts to make such that the cost is at a minimum. Okay, so how are we going to do this? So we can either make our first cut at 1 or at 3 or at 5, right? That's the first thing we notice, or at 4. We can either make the cut at any one of these 4 possible choices. Let's say first we made the cut at 1. Okay, hypothetically we decide to make the cut at 1. Well, once we made the cut at 1, our stick is gonna look like this. And that took some amount of cost, right? Making that cut right there took a cost of 7. Okay, now let's say we have these 3 options left. So we made the cut at 1, this is gone. We did that already. Now let's say we have these 3 options left, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, let's say now we decide to cut at 4. Well, let's cut at 4. But how much is this cost going to take? Well, it's going to be 7 minus 1, which is the size of the stick, which is going to be 6. So that cut will take a cost of 6. So we cut at 3. So now we're left with this stick, okay? And we move 3. Oh, sorry, we were cutting at 4. My bad. So we cut at 4, and now we end up with this stick. And we remove 4 because that's not part of our cuts anymore. We made that cut already. Now we need to cut at either 3 or 5, let's just decide to cut at 3 first. So we'll cut at 3, and if we make this cut, we see 3 is part of this stick. So now how much is this cut going to cost? Well, 4 minus 1 is 3, so it's going to cost 3, right? And so we make this cut at 3, then we end up a stick like this, and we move 3. And now we have one final cut to make, and that is 5. So let's make the cut at 5. Cut at 5. Then we end up with a stick like this. Remove 5, and that cut cost how much? Well, it was 4 minus 7 originally. That is another 3. So our final cost was 7 plus 12, 19. Okay, and that is obviously not our answer, as you can see from the output. So now, what was the problem here? Well, we just arbitrarily decided which cuts to make, right? We decided, let's just pick one, let's try the next, try the next. We have to know which one's the best cut to make. And how do we know that? Well, it's just kind of like brute force. You have to try making a cut at each possibility and then pick the minimum out of it. Okay? So let's go back all the way to the beginning. Okay? So we have this 1 to 5 and then 0 to 7. And now we need to decide whether to make a cut at 1 or at 3 or at 4 or at 5. Well, we saw how just now we were making the cuts at each point and we were calculating the cost, right? We were calculating the cost. If we made the cut at 1 or made it at 3 or we were doing it at 4, and we were adding up all the costs, and then that gave us the cost of making the cut at 1. Well, we're going to do the same for each one. So we're going to do it for 3 and then 4 and then 5. And so cutting at each one of these will give us a cost. Okay? And then we're going to add up all those costs. But it's going to keep working down recursively, because let's say we made the cut at 1 again, right? Well, we saw now we have 3 cuts left to make, and now between these are cuts that were left, and now between these choices that we have 3, 4, and 5, and this stick, we have 3 other choices to make. We could either cut at 3 or at 4 or at 5. So I need to try all the possibilities and then calculate the minimum. And then once I do that, let's say I cut it at let's say 3, right? Then once again, I have to cut 4 and 5. So I have to try each of those possibilities and then find the minimum cut to make first. So that's basically the answer. That's kind of how you want to approach the algorithm. So the cost of cutting between 0 and 7 is basically 7, the right point, minus the left point, right, or the size of the stick or whatever you want to call it, plus what? Plus the minimum, okay, of making the cuts, making the cuts either at what? At, so let's say we made it at 1, that would be the 0, 1 plus 1, 7, right? Because then that would basically be that. We made the cut at 1, we have to find the cost of this and this, or the cost of 0 to 3 plus the cost of 3 to 7, or the last cut, well, not the last cut, 0 to 4 plus C 4 to 7, or 0 to 5 plus the cost of cutting between 5 and 7, right? And then these further are going to be broken up into further recursive calls, okay? But that's the general recursive equation right there, okay? It's the cost of the, so the cost of left to right is basically right minus left. That's how we got 7 plus the cost of, like, if you the cost of each of the cuts, the sticks of each of the cost of the new of cutting up the new sticks after trying out each cut, right? The minimum one. So that's that. That's how we're going to kind of approach this problem, but that would basically be the top-down approach. So now we just want to flip this around and try to do the bottom-up approach, because that's a little quicker usually, and it's a little faster. So although time complexity is usually the same, but in LEETCODE those tend to run a lot faster. Anyways, so now let's do that. Well, you're going to see further, when we break up 1 to 7, it's going to be broken up into further calls. C 1 to 7 is basically C, actually let's do C to 4 to 7. It's going to be broken up into what? C4, the only cut that we have left is going to be 7 minus 4, right? Plus the minimum of all the cuts in between. Well, between 4 and 7, which is the end of this, we only have one cut, which is going to be 5. So we'll just, this is going to be 5. 4 plus 5 plus C 5 to 7, right? And the size, the cost of cutting between 4 and 5 will be 0 because there's no cuts in between 4 and 5. And between 5 and 7 will also be 0 because there's no cuts between 5 and what's after, which the end of the stick was just 7. So this will be 0, 0, and then 7 minus 4 is 3. So the cost of 4 of cutting between cutting between 4 and 7 is just 3. Okay, the cost of cutting between the stick 4, the 4 and 7 is just 3. But as you can see, every time we're going to, if you notice, we're always going to hit a recursive call that is right between two of the cuts. So it's either going to end up like at C. What do I mean by that? It's going to be either C 4 to 5 or C 5 to 7 or C what's left? 1 to 3 or C 3 to 4, right? As you can see, these are each of our cuts. They're always going to be between them, or with the starting and ending, which is 0 and 7. All right, 0 to 1. And each of these are going to return 0. Now that you kind of understand that, now we can work on the bottom-up approach. So how we're going to approach this is we're basically going to be using DP. So to find the cost between 0 and 7, we're going to find the cost of making the cuts between 0 and the previous cut, which was at 5. Okay? So what's the cost of making all of it at 5? Well, before that, we need to know the minimum between 0 and 4, and then before that, we need to know 3, and then before that, we need to know 1. Okay? So now let's say we were trying to find the minimum cost or the best cuts to make, or whatever you want to say, the cost it would take to cut between 0 and 5. Well, we see we have these cuts. So we have between 0 and 5, right? So what is it? It's really the minimum of all the cuts in between. So 1, 3, and 4, right? So the cost will be originally 5 minus 0, which is 5, right? Plus now I need to check either between the minimum of C, which is 0 to 1, right? Or plus 1 to 5, right? So I have to first try to make the cut at 1 and then see what's the cost of that. Or I have to try to make the cost at cut 3 and see what that would give me, right? Or I have to try to make the cost at cut 4 and see what that would give me. But when you're doing the bottom-up approach, you're going to have these calculated already. You're going to have 0 to 1 calculated already, right? Because we already found the cost. By the time we hit 5, we already found the cost of each of the cuts in between this, from every point to every other point. We're going to know the cost from 1 to 4, and 1 to 3, and from 0 to 1, or from 1 to 4, right? We're going to know that. So we'll have 0 to 1 already. We'll have 1 to 5 already like that. We'll have 0 to 3 already, 3 to 5, 0 to 4, 4 to 5 already. So we're just going to calculate this, and then we're going to check, and then that's going to give us the answer. So then once we reach that, we'll know the minimum cost between 0 and 5, right? We'll know the minimum. We'll know that cost. And then we're going to hit 0 to 7. All right, we're going to hit 0 to 7. Excuse me. When we're doing 0 to 5, we won't know the cost between 4 to 5. So we won't know between 3 to 5. We won't know between 1 to 5. But we'll know everything between 0 and 4. So what we're gonna have to do now is try to find the cost between 4 and 5, and then 5 and 3, and then 5 and 1, and then finally we can find out 5 and 0. Okay, so 5 and 4 will be just 0, and then 5 and 3 will either be the cost of the minimum. Same thing, we're doing the same thing now, just at a smaller scale. So what's 5 and 3, right? And now we're going to try all the cuts in between. We only have one cut in between, which is the cut at 4, right? So then we're going to do between 3 and 4 and 4 and 5. So basically what I'm trying to say is now the cost of 3 to 5 would be, right, what would that have been? It will be the cost of 5 minus 3, which is 2, plus the cost of cutting at 3 to 4, plus the cost of 3 to 5. And this will basically be the minimum, because you're trying all the possibilities in between. That will make more sense. We only have one cut in between in this case, which is 4. That will make more sense when we try 1 and 5. Will be what? 2 plus the minimum, which is minimum is C of 5. So 1 to 3, right? Or plus C of 3 to 5. Or we can do C of 1 to 4 plus C of 4 to 5, right? And you'll see now we already have C of 4 to 5 because we just calculated it. Well, we're going to kind of calculate this step. I'm missing steps, sorry. It'll be 2 plus 1 to 4, 1 to 3, 4. Oh yeah, we already calculated 4 to 5. Forgive me. We already calculated 4 to 5. That would be 0, right? Because they're right next to each other. We would have calculated C 4 to 5 first, and that would have just been 0 because they're right next to each other. That's that. Okay. So that's how this answer works. So what we're basically doing now, we're gonna have 3 variables. We're gonna have I, J, and K. Okay. I is basically going to be expanding. We're going to do first at 0, then 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7. I is working that way, right? And then finally we can calculate the cost between 0 and 7. Sorry, this is just the cuts. This is just going to be the cuts. Right? J, well, remember when we got to 5, right? We need to first calculate before we can calculate the cost between 0 and 5, we need to calculate the cost between 5 and 4, and then 5 and 3, and then 5 and 1, and then 5 and 0, right? So that's what J is going to do. So J is going to be pointing like let's say I was at right here 5. J is going to be right here. Okay, and then we need to calculate the cost between 4 and 5. Then we need to calculate the cost between 5 and 3. So I'll move J backwards. Right, and J will be right here now. And then, so what is K then? Well, K, well, remember, let's say we calculate this, and then we need to calculate between 5 and 1, right? Well, when we need to calculate between 5 and 1, well, we need to calculate first we need to check, well, between 5 and 1, what is that? That's basically between C, 1 to 5, which is what in this case? This is J. Well, I'll do it like this. 1 to 5 is basically 5 minus 1 plus C of what? Minimum of either C of 1 to 3 plus C of 3 to 5, or C of 1 to 4 plus C of 4 to 5. Why do I keep doing this again? Because it's a little confusing, but once you really understand it, it'll make a lot of sense. Right? So we could either make it between 5 and 1, we could either make the cut at 3, or we can make it at 4, right? So that's what K is going to be doing. K is going to be that pointer that's going to hold where we're making the cut. So we're going to either first try making the cut at 4, and then we're going to calculate the cost between 5 and 1, and then we're going to try to make it at 3. And then we're going to find the minimum, whether it was best made at cut 3 or best cut was at 4. And then we're going to save that, the cost between J and I, as the minimum of that. So this will be the cost of ji is basically what? Well, it's basically I minus j plus minimum of what's the math symbol? I don't know. Basically, you're gonna be moving k around of the cuts from between c to k, from j to k plus minimum of c jk plus c k I for all k in between k is all cuts between j and I. Okay, this is it. This is what you need to understand, that you're looking for j and I minus j is basically the minimum of the cuts between j to k and k to I as you move k around between all the cuts. As you move k around, you guys get what I mean. As you move k around between j and I, okay? That's basically the answer, and that's what this equation is doing. So you'll see right now we have c. Let's erase c. That's basically our new cuts. It's just of size 2 bigger because we need to add the 0, which is the starting, and we need to add n, which is at the ending. So I'm just adding these up. Then we need to sort it. We need to make our dp, and dp is going to be basically holding all the answers for between j and I. So dp of j I is basically our answer c j of I, min cost j and I. And now the first loop is moving I this way, right? So this is doing the second loop, as you can see, is moving j backwards, and we're going to start right one before I. Right? It's going to be moving j backwards towards this way, towards 0. And k also is going to be moving backwards towards 0, and it's going to be checking for everything in between. It's going to start at I minus 1, and it's going to end at j, right? Because it has to check everything in between. It's not going to end at j, it's going to end right before j, like right here. So you see, we start at I minus, right here. We start at I minus 1, and we end right before j. The minimum is what? Well, if they're right next to each other, if it's 0, we're basically setting it to max value. And if it's not 0, we'll just reuse what we calculated before, because at some point we would have calculated these before. Or it's basically the right dp of j, which is jk. Let me move this a little bigger so it looks a little nicer. Which is j to k, as we mentioned, right? J to k plus k to I, right? Plus what? I, right here, minus j, plus I minus j. And that will give us the answer. And then we save it, and then we return. That's basically that. I hope that helped, guys. If you have any questions, just let me know in the comments below. Comment, subscribe. I know it's a little long, but it's a little confusing problem, and it's really important to understand how it works, like internally, how the algorithm is really built and the thought process behind it.